I'm Elizabeth with Logic Walk. In our last lesson, we introduced the Logic Walk operating system simulator and saw how the shell interacts with the simulator to handle user commands. In this lesson, we'll focus on what happens next, how a pressed key is handled, and the steps the operating system takes to process it. Before we begin, it's important to note that the shell handles key presses in two different ways, one process for regular characters and another for the enter key. In this part of the lesson, we'll focus on what happens when a user presses a character. Imagine the Logic Walk OS simulator is interrupted when the user presses the K key. The OS handles it in 3 steps. First, it appends K to the shell as the shell's user input. Then that user's input is copied to the shell's buffer. Then finally, the keyboard interrupt resets to false. Now let's walk through the entire process for another example. When the user presses the P key. At the instant the key is pressed, the state of the simulator looks like this. The host name is computer 1, the status is idle, the keyboard interrupt is true, the pressed key is P, the user input in the shell is empty, and the shell buffer still holds the prompt, showing that the shell is ready for more commands. In response to this key press, the Logic Walk OS updates as follows. The host name and status remain the same. The keyboard interrupt resets to false. The pressed key is still recorded as P, and both the shell's user input and buffer update to include P. The keyboard interrupt will remain false until the user presses another key. Now suppose the user enters W and D right after pressing P. After the Logic Walk OS processes all 3 keys, the state looks like this. The host name remains computer 1, the status remains idle, the keyboard interrupt is false, the pressed key is D, and in the shell, both the user input and the buffer contain PWD. Notice how each pressed key builds a chain of characters in the shell. Next, let's see what happens when we press the enter key. Upon pressing enter, the Logic Walk OS performs the following actions. It appends a new line character to the shell, which also gets copied to the shell buffer. It executes the command stored in the shell user input property, in this case PWD, the command we used in the last lesson to print the name or address of the current folder. If the command produces an output, that output is appended to the shell and copied to the shell buffer. Finally, it resets shell's user input in the shell to an empty string and resets the keyboard interrupt to false. The final state of the Logic Walk OS is now the following. The host name and the status remain computer 1 and idle respectively. The keyboard interrupt is false, the pressed key is enter. In the shell, the user input is empty, while the shell buffer shows everything. It shows the commands we typed, the name of the root folder on the next line, and finally another prompt, signaling that the shell is ready to take more commands. Let's try this out by running the PWD command one more time. Click into the terminal in the shell, type PWD, and then hit enter. You'll see the root folder printed. That wraps up chapter 1 of the operating systems course. In the next chapter, we'll explore how file systems interact with the OS.